Thanks, Walter.
I will add one thing. There are contests going on here at CornCon where you get codes. If you haven't registered for that, you can do that out in the lobby. If you stay to the end of the talk, ask good questions, you get to visit the speaker and get a code that gives you points. Pay attention.
There you go. All right. I'm Dr. Edward Marchwewka. So this talk is actually surprisingly nothing new. It's something that we've all been talking around, but I want to frame it in a different context, and that's the point. And it's also not a technical talk. It's more about risk management and communication. So yes, I did my doctorate in cybersecurity risk communication, so that's been my specialty and what I really like. And so finding new ways to make it relevant or other ways to make cyber relevant is where this talk is around and where my research lies. And so trying to find another way to make it fit. The other thing with this talk, there'll be some ideas that might be somewhat controversial, or you may completely disagree with them and think it's total crap, and that's fine. But again, it's just to make you think, especially as I come from it from like an academic perspective, may not always be right. So a little bit of background about myself. I did my doctorate at California Southern University in cybersecurity risk communication. I presented here 2 years ago on those results. Happy to totally geek out on that. I got my start in quality back in 2008 when I was working in manufacturing. And started off in practical process improvement as a team member, then a facilitator and a process champion. And then eventually turning that into a Six Sigma Master Black Belt. Also did ASQs, Certified Manager of Quality and Operational Excellence. And then I've also been in IT for over 20 years, specifically with either direct responsibility for cyber or indirect, so for the last 11 or so years. Although my first foray was actually back in 2008 when someone said, hey, we did a global pen test. Go around and ask everyone how they're going to fix their stuff and write a report for the CIO. Of course, then at that point I was still an academic and wrote a way too long report for the CIO, and I had to revise it because it was like 37 pages, and they're like, it needs to be 2. So, yeah, there's always that. So I want to give some background of how this talk kind of happened. So I was at a meeting of the CISO Executive Network. It's a breakfast group. If you're not a part of it, go to the CISO Executive Network, or just Google CISO Executive Network. It's run by Bill Siglin. It's a great environment to get good information, talk to your fellow peers, and have a good breakfast every 2-3 months together. And the topic was on DevSecOps and the struggle that we have with the coders, the developers doing the things that we don't want them to do, and then they like go to launch and they're like, oh, we got to run it through app review, and then of course it fails, and we got to kick it back, and everyone's mad at us. And I said, what we really need with DevSecOps and really security in general is to take more of a quality mindset. Just like total quality management did for the industry and for manufacturing, we need to do something similar with security. And it really jumped off. Like, people were like, yeah, we should be totally doing that. So then I was like, is this a new idea? I'm like, probably not, but let me dig into this. And sure enough, the first books, articles were in the early 2000s on this idea of total security management, where it's completely involved. And then as I've been researching it and thinking about it, and here's my first controversial point, it's like, where does the CISO live and where should security live? A lot of people say, oh, not in IT. Okay, fine. In finance, in risk, I've never heard anyone say quality. What if we put security in quality? Noodle on that as we go through this talk. Because as we talk about total security management, it's more cultural than technical. And I think that's something we've realized here. Now, if you're still, if you're working at a place that is still doing a lot of blocking and tackling, maybe in IT. I've worked in those places before where it's like, we don't have basic stuff. We need to do that first. But, as we had further talks in the network, it was resonating more and more that this is something that we really need to do. So that's why when I had this opportunity to talk, I put it together. By the way, this is also the first time I'm doing this presentation, so it's a little rough, and I appreciate your patience with it. So we're going to go over TQM. What was that? For those of you without a quality background, the evolution of TSM, where it's been, TSM versus TQM. There's been a lot of criticisms of TSM, like you can't measure it. There's a topic near and dear to my heart. the principles, and then how do you actually implement it, because I like giving actionable stuff. So when you think about security as a profession, you can say, oh, it's been around since the 80s because we had, firewalls, maybe even before that. But the true first CISO, right, Steve Cass back in 96. So like really it's 30 years old. And now we've had quality for a long time, but quality really first came around with Frederick Taylor in 1909. So it's the idea of quality management improvement processes is over 100 years old. So we're a little behind in the security world. And then it took another 40 years, roughly, where Deming was working in the military complex and during World War II, having better munitions. Like when you're producing lots of bombs and bullets, you need them to be working and all really good. So then he took those ideas of statistical efficiency in the 50s and actually went to Japan and helped them rebuild things, which then sparked all of that in the 50s and 60s, and then the rest of the world in the 70s was like, damn, Japan's kicking our butt in everything. And by the late 70s and 80s, you've got total quality management taking the world over. So 1909 to the 80s, right? That's a long time to change ideas and methodologies. And so when we think about security, of like, why are we struggling so hard? Well, we're still babies in that step. And I think it's the approach that we have to look at things. But if we can glom onto some of these other ideas, like TQM, we may be able to shift it. Now, TQM wasn't just about making better products, right? Before TQM, it was make a thing, at the end, inspect it. If it was any good, let it go. If it was bad, kick it back. How many of our environments look like that, right? A lot of people, right? Oh, I wrote code, give it to security. This is crap, send it back. Hey, we signed this new contract, security, can you review it? Well, you already signed it, thanks. TQM is about transforming organizational culture, and TSM should be about that too. And like I said, this is nothing that we haven't all been saying. We need to be embedded with the business, we need to be more involved. But I think we're taking a stick approach and not a carrot approach. And also, cybersecurity risk communications is all about connecting and answering that question, what's in it for me? And so if we can bring things around and say, look, Mr. and Mrs. Executive, we did this back in the 70s and 80s with quality. Yeah, and quality is now a part of all of our processes. Good, why can't we do that with security? It's that same concept. TQM really just shifted the way we think, and I think that's where we need to go with security. It's shifting that. So when we think about total quality management in practice, the first thing that always comes to mind is Kaizen, right? The continuous improvement idea that we're working iteratively to remove inefficiencies to make the process better, and security needs to take a very similar approach to that. The Toyota Production System, or TPS, was developed when Toyota embraced TQM and enabled people to stop the line with the on-down cord. The Toyota line could be stopped by any employee at any time for a quality function. How many people can do that in security? I remember I worked at an organization, and if we had a phishing attack, the only way we could blindly, as a security team, send an email out to all users was if it had impacted more than 40,000 people. Otherwise, we had to get the okay. That's not empowering the security team to do the thing they need to do. We eventually changed that because then we had some money stolen because of the phishing thing, and it was like, we could have caught this earlier if you would have just given us the ask for permission later. Just do it and say sorry. So the other piece of another thing of TQM is customer focus. A lot of organizations that I worked with Six Sigma and process improvement initiatives, it's about, well, will this project save us money? It's always about the dollars saved. But what if we made it better and people bought more? Right? That's what a lot of quality initiatives did back in the 70s and 80s. It made it better so they bought more. The focus needs to be on the customers, and I think if we bring that bend to it with respect to security too, maintaining trust, maintaining good customer relationships. Ritz-Carlton in the hospitality industry, that's one of their main focuses, customer satisfaction. all of their staff are empowered to take reasonable action to maintain the reputation for excellence at the Ritz-Carlton. You know, how many of us can do that in the security space? How many of you know exactly who your customers are as a security team and or as a business? Which is good. A lot of people don't. I've worked at places where it's like, what do you do here? Oh, we make pumps. And the other person says, we make drives, and now you got a complete disconnect. While both answers are right, what's the focus? And who's the customer of those things? When you focus on the customer, it's not just about reducing defects, it's about delivering the product, as you said, and to the customer's expectations. In TQM, employees are involved, as they should be with TSM. In US healthcare, nurses, doctors, clinicians, and all staff are empowered to work together to find solutions and bring up issues that affect patient care and patient safety. Without that empowerment, without that focus, we could have much worse results. And actually, it leads to better patient outcomes. Having patient or employees involved has also improved processes and made complete ownership in TQM. When you look at a process approach, when you look at it from a, look, I'm not attacking you, I'm attacking the process because something's broken here, it changes the perspective. Not to pick on Sony, I'm just using them as an example of someone who actually did good in their manufacturing processes. You know, they were able to optimize for quality by having better supply chain, ensuring their component quality. So, you know, it gets a little bit into third-party management as well with respect to quality. And they were doing it all along the line. Not just, you know, so it was the parts coming in as well as what was going out. TQM is founded in data. They have metrics that they use regularly, you know, such as you know, the statistical analysis out of black belt, being able to look at the changes over time, using run charts to find where their deficiencies are. So TSM, you know, we need to look at how our business risks have been changing. That security can't be siloed anymore. It really needs to be involved. It's not just a job for the IT department or even physical security. You know, there's such a blending of the two. So, you know, one of the major things that we've realized with security is needing to bring it in to everything that we do. The frontline employee who's getting those phishing emails need to be able to recognize them, and you can say, well, yeah, we've been doing that. But the attacks are constantly evolving. Now, you know, with AI, they're getting a little bit better, although I still see a whole bunch that aren't, and I'm wondering why they're not using AI, because it's like you could do better. And I want to reply to some of them and just be like, really? Really? Are you even trying? Did this really work? Like, who's ever thought about consulting for the bad guy? Look, for just 10% of the take, I'll help you. I'm kidding. Look, this is why this was flagged. The traditional view, though, of security as being reactive needs to change. And staying ahead of it is what's really going to help us be able to integrate more with the business, to get them to let us know what's going on ahead of time. Eyes and ears out there is only going to be possible by embedding. You know, really, when we think about shifting from our siloed approach to an integrated, to a total security management, it's an evolution of how we think. It takes all the principles, continuous improvement, process integration, and organizational-wide responsibility. It has to be a business thing. Just like safety, quality, those types of things. In many veins, even fiscal responsibility. Like most people will think about, like, you know, can we spend this, or do we have to get approval to spend on something? those things stay together. So let's look at these. So with TQM, integration was a key. Quality wasn't just one department, one individual. It's the entire organization. Whether you're a line manager or a line worker or a manager, the decision about quality lies with them, that individual, to be able to recognize something. Total security management needs to be integrated into every process, every function. Finance, marketing, HR, product development, they all need to make it part of what they think about. You know, when you think about like even the HR system, having them think about if this data is compromised, what does that do for our employees? It's that people element, or the security department, you know, or someone even on the networking side saying, hey, we want to implement, I'm going to steal this one from you, we want to implement 2FA. And which everyone's like, yeah, we need to do MFA. How many times a day should someone have to re-authenticate? And that needs to be a balance, and it needs to be a discussion too, right? So for instance, an employee who goes into the HR system once a day to clock in, maybe twice a day to clock out, every time. But what about an HR person who's logging into the HRMS all day from the office? What's the risk on that? It's pretty low, right? So how about we have them do it once a day, twice a day? What about a trader who's having to move billions of dollars a day and has to be done quickly? How often should they have to MFA? Potentially every time. But when you think about the speed of the trades that are needed, that's that balance. So the question is, it depends. But that's where that discussion comes into mind of what other compensating controls are there. Total quality management's proactive. We're always trying to iterate, make it better. TSM should be that too, instead of just firefighting. Incident response is an element of it, right? When there's a issue with the product line, you know, when metal is found in the macaroni and cheese, what do? That's incident response, right? Same type of thing. Maybe they scrap the whole line, that whole lot, but they've got to find it. There's no difference in that. You know, I'll pick on product development. Under the old model, security is at the end. We got to be earlier on it. Write a little bit of code, have it checked out, you know, every step of the way. Continuous improvement. So how many have had the question, are we secure? We've all had that question. Ask them back the question about quality. Do we have no defects in whatever it is we make or do? Do we ever have issues or customer complaints? There's no such thing as a perfect system when you think about it from a quality perspective. And the same thing applies with security. There is none. But we have acceptable limits of quality, right? We are willing to invest this much for this level of quality for the product we do, right? And different organizations have that. I remember when I was in my MBA, they shared a story about McDonald's Happy Meal toys. And a group had designed a Happy Meal toy that didn't break, and McDonald's rejected it. They're like, this thing needs to break quickly or be absolutely just kind of throwaway, because if it breaks, the child is upset, and then they want a new toy, which means you need another Happy Meal. That was their level of quality. But how many of you drove 2.5, 3 hours this morning or last night from the Chicagoland area? What if your car didn't meet that level of quality? So you want that high level of quality. That's a discussion someone has to have. And I think that's the same thing with total security management. It's not going to be perfect. No, it's constantly changing. Just like with quality, machinery changes, environmental things happen, the humidity changes in China, which affects something here, which causes your car to fail, right? There's just environmental things. Security is the same way. It's constantly changing and evolving. So that's why we have to have continuous improvement and constant iteration. There's a cultural shift that has to happen with TQM and TSM. Under a TSM model, marketing might say, hey, I want to use this third-party info to collect data. But with TSM, they're going to go, but I need the right controls in place. And I've seen this happen. When I took over security at Chicago Public Schools, people just signed up for any little bit of software they wanted. And then at the end of my tenure, people would come to me and say, hey, I want to get this. How do we keep student data safe? So we had added that element because they knew if they brought it later, it would die. It would just get cut off. And part of that was a key partnership. I made good friends with the chief procurement officer, and so we were able to stop it before purchasing. So if any of you are looking for a key relationship, it's whoever is approving purchases. There you go. As a stopgap, eventually they'll come to you and you realize you're there to help. Metrics and measurement, I can go on all day about metrics. Go to my LinkedIn profile, I got 140 tactical metrics listed there for you if that's something you're looking for. TQM metrics, though, are usually immediately visible, like reduced defects or improved customer satisfaction. TSM is a little bit less, right? How do you measure something that didn't happen? Changing it to perspectives, or not perspective, to effectiveness of items, or using quantitative metrics such as reduction in incidents, and qualitative, like employee awareness and engagement in security practices overall. And yes, there are costs. TQM was expensive to implement, but it paid off over time. And I think TSM is going to go the same way. Being more proactive with security, we all know, helps an organization. So why? What's the point? Look, we all know more sophisticated attacks. We're blurring the lines of physical and cyber. We had the ransomware in Germany where a patient died because of lack of access to data and information, so a cyber event turned physical. There's lots of examples of that out there. Remote work and distributed network, there's a far larger attack surface out there. The bigger one, is supply chain. With total security management, you're involving the third party, just like quality did. We need good parts coming in, because if they don't work, it's not going to happen. Like car manufacturers don't make the fender. Someone else makes the fender, and if they're not precise, it won't line up. It has to be. So there has to be quality there. And that's where the third-party risk management comes in, because they can definitely affect you. I remember I worked at a place, it wasn't a security thing, but we had one supplier for a diaphragm and a pump in Mexico, and the plant closed. And we couldn't make that pump for 9 months because someone else had to retool it. So, actual lesson learned. Now, quality does have some regulatory things. Like I've worked in places that are FDA regulated, and you have to do the quality piece of it. But there's also some market demands that require it, like car manufacturers in the 70s and 80s. Gosh, why is Toyota kicking our butt? Because they're making a better product that's actually cheaper because they're making a better product. There's less rework in it. We have compliance for security, yes, but TSM goes beyond that. It's just the foundation. All right, we all know why it's bad. So, some of the criticisms of TSM. Look, it's really hard. Maybe, but you do it in small bites and small pieces and small parts of it, right? If you're trying to do more total quality management, you don't hire a bunch of master black belts and then train everyone right away. It takes time to incorporate process improvement initiatives and getting people to think more of like, how can we improve things? When I worked at Thermo Fisher Scientific in manufacturing, we started that process of process improvement over time. It took us 3 years to get everyone in that more quality mindset of, geez, we're doing this process and it's a pain. How can we improve it? How can we make it better? From rearranging cubes or work lines to something as simple as changing tools by doing step analysis of employees when they were manufacturing something. We actually did this with one guy. He was going from one end of his bench to the other because of where the tools were. So we rearranged them. And it sounds trivial, but until someone actually looks at it to say, this guy's going 37 extra steps per part, and he does 500 a day or whatever. It's like that's a lot of movement to the point where the guy's now doing this, and then every now and then has to take a half step over. We did the same thing in our shipping department, saving a bunch of steps because of the way they were moving things. We just reconfigured items. So this idea, though, of it's hard to do shouldn't deter you, right? Imagine in 1909 being Frederick Taylor saying, hey, we should do more efficiency analysis, and then trying to like blast that through the industry without proving that it works. Well, TSM's been around for 20 years, and it does work. There are companies that are doing this. And there are companies that basically have done that because they're doing TQM. So it's not something that's hard. If someone pushes back that it is too hard, they're missing the big picture. It isn't about adding layers of bureaucracy necessarily. It's about changing how we think. And that was the whole point of this talk, is trying to think more about how we present that. TSM is hard to measure. You can't measure security. No, that's garbage. The thing that we struggle with is the communication of those measures and or non-incidents. Some examples of KPIs, incident reduction rates, vulnerability remediation times, employee training completion, which are all great for us. We know what those mean. How are you telling your executives and decision makers what those mean? Answering the question of what's in it for me and how it impacts them is the key to doing that. TSM's too costly. Look, we know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that's the case here. Now you could argue, look at Target, they're fine. They had a mega breach, and yet here we are still talking about it, at least I am. Yes, they recovered. Mega breaches, though, especially with large corporations, tend to have a minor inconvenience in the grand scheme, right? Their stock price dipped and it recovered and has done better 6 months later from initial, and then it's doing great now. Yes, some people lost their jobs. Their program has improved, and then they settled all their court cases. It's the smaller breaches. It's the doctor's office that says, screw it, I'm just going to close. It's the smaller ones, the ones you don't hear about, that have the real impact, where the prevention is totally worth it, and usually it's something easy, right? It's firewalls, MFA, patching, and not clicking on stuff. It's obvious, easy things. But people don't know to necessarily do that until it's part of what they do. Like, do you lock the door at night when you close the office? Yes. That should be the same principle for the digital assets. Same idea. Or insurance, right? Everyone has homeowners insurance, I hope. Car insurance. Sometimes it's state mandated. But we don't think about the prevention measures necessarily. So it's not necessarily like, no, it's not too costly. But if you don't have homeowners or you don't have car insurance, it becomes very costly very quickly when it happens. Or not even insurance, right? How many of you maintain your brakes on your car? Like, yes, we maintain the brakes on our car. We make small investments so that we don't slam into the truck or the bus or people in general, right? It's those types of things. And quality makes sure the brakes work. And sometimes they don't. My true story. A year ago, I got new brakes on my wife's van, and she's like, "The brakes are doing absolutely horrible." It was like she had a death rattle when we slow. You're going to highway speeds, and then you have to hit the brakes, and then they like rattle, and it's just like, oh, this is really bad. Turns out the rotor's warped, and it just happened. Covered under warranty, though. Yay, total quality management, right? And it happens. Iterative changes. You monitor. Hey, there's a death rattle. You change it. Okay. Another one is it's difficult to change the culture of security. You can't get people to do it. You can't make them want to do it. No, but TQM faced the same challenges. We wanted people to shift from that's quality's problem to it's everyone's problem. And security needs to do the same thing by continuous training, education, involvement on what that looks like, what it means. Do they need to be eyes on glass all the time? No, they just need to see the warning signs. One of my PhD students that I'm dissertation chair for is doing his research in hospitals of IoT devices, and that clinicians, one of his hypotheses is that clinicians can't recognize a compromise and what that might look like. And so he's like, the security team can, but they're not everywhere, and they're limited. So, and then also the perspective that executives don't care. Well, they don't see the necessary impact. And one of the things we talked about was ransomware and shutting down the hospital, and like that's the obvious one. And then same thing with stealing data and have a HIPAA violation. But everyone forgets about the I in the triad, which is what if you were able to change the voltage on a pacemaker to either too low or too high? It's subtle. What if you could change records on patient's information? And how would you identify that, of what it was set at? So it's like, oh yeah. So that's some of the things that he's looking into and thinking about. All right. And then a key part of this, am I doing okay? Yeah. Is how is security baked into the missions and value, or mission and values of the organization? A lot of organizations, especially manufacturing, will put quality in their mission or at least their values. Are we doing anything with that in security? And if not, is there a way to do that, or can we embed it into quality, like I said at the beginning of the talk? All right. So core principles of TSM. Look, it's holistic. Security is not isolated. We know that. We've been saying it. It's shared. And like TQM, we need to bring it in. If your organization is developing a new product, security might have been at the end, but now we need to do it at the beginning. Being able to identify not only potential vulnerabilities, but also privacy issues, it prevents delays in rolling things out. Continuous improvement. So in TSM, it looks like what we're doing already. Vulnerability assessments, pen tests, audits, these are all areas of improvement. These aren't things we have to do, it's how we iterate the process to make it better. Okay? And again, there's no such thing as perfect security, and it's not going to be. We have to accept that our company's version of perfect is what that is. Involving everyone, making sure they're well trained and informed, and rewarding and reinforcing positive behavior. Get away from punishment, like you let them in, why did you do that? No, be positive on it. Using data to measure, and it's not just internal data, there's tons of metrics we can do, but also using external data. How many of you use Waze still? I do, because it lets me know really where the cops are, right? That's the number one. And that's external data. I love it when someone's up ahead and be like, hey, there's a cop up here, right? We all do that. There's the threats, depending on your perspective. Cross-functional collaboration. Look, when someone brings something in, like when I was at the schools, hey, we want to do this product. Me and the lawyers got real chummy. We were good friends. So was procurement. We worked together to make things happen. Because someone said, hey, as educators, we've evaluated this software. We think it's really good. And we're like, yeah, let's make that happen. I'm not a content expert on education, but I can do the cyber thing. I can do it. We can do the review and make sure that we can get this implemented for you, and working together. And a lot of times it was smaller organizations, so we became the consultants to them as well. But they thought of it. So, do you have holistic integration, continuous improvement, employee involvement, data-driven decision making, and cross-functional collaboration? All right. So, TSM is going to address your common risks, insider threats. When one, you're doing monitoring, but other people are going to see things too, hear things potentially. For some reason, people like to talk and chat and bring in others, and there's no perfect crime unless you're doing it by yourself. As soon as you bring in other people, someone's got to die. Right? What happened in, what was it? I don't remember which Batman it was, but the Joker, Dark Knight, he killed everyone, right? There you go. See? Thank you very much for loading the truck. I will take this with me. Yeah. I can't remember because there's only one true Batman. Huh? Third-party vulnerability, so our supply chain and reducing likelihood of breach. TSM helps us recover faster because it's going to be smaller, right? I remember talking to an individual who kept failing our phishing campaigns. I said, look, the last time someone actually clicked on something, it took the entire team 2 days to clean everything up. They're like, okay. I'm like, if you tell me about a potential phish, it takes us about 10 minutes to look into it and then clean things up. Maybe an hour. Please send that over. We can get that ahead of time. And so that reduces your incident response time, helps you get and minimize the impact. When we have the better process in place, less scrambling happens, and we can execute with our plans. Financial institutions get hit by DDoSes all the time. I remember talking to one of the CISOs there, and he was talking about he was getting like a T a second coming in, which most of us, that would just kill us, into our main environment. With a good TSM environment, the teams can see what's happening right away and know exactly what's going on. And that's just good preparation as well. All right. How to get going. So first is an assessment. What does your program look like? Is it just you? Where's it at? What's the current policies and procedures? What does your stack look like? What third-party relationships exist? How good's the IR plan? Could you actually execute on it? Is it overly specific? Is it underly specific? Have you tested it? Are the employees aware? They have a good plan? Then developing a security framework. Defining the roles and responsibilities of individuals, who has what. Again, empowering procedures and guidelines. So when I was at CPS, one of the things that we did was when we wrote a policy at the board level, it empowered us to do anything necessary to protect the district. And the CIO and I went back and forth on that, and I said, look, if we had an attack and it was found to be coming from the CEO's laptop in the middle of a board meeting, I need the power to take it and take it offline. And he's like, I agree, let's put it in there, but between you and me, come get me first. But we needed that blank check. And how many of you have that blank check and coverage to do what is necessary up to and including unplugging the organization? One person has two. You did. Yes. Consider that. You can even put in there with appropriate communications, but you need to be able to act and then ask for forgiveness later. Integrating security into every place, or every phase of the organization. Whether it's launching a new product or hiring a new employee or engaging in a new partnership. Continuous training, communications, regular updates, tailored training for those people who are just click happy, or the people who are like, I knew it was a fish, I wanted to see what happened. I hate those people. Dude, you're throwing off my numbers, man. Killing me here. Yeah, but I knew it was you and I knew it was safe. Yeah, let's not do that. Your reward for seeing what that looks like is extra training. Oh, do I have to? Well, you did click on it. Continuous monitoring and improvement. So regular security audits, vuln testing, pen testing. Again, those aren't checklist. Those are your iterative items. Those are your ways to continuously improve the process. Your metrics and KPIs, we can geek out about that later. Integration into business goals. So fully understanding what you do and how you make money. If you can't do that, go ask 5 different people at your organization and make sure you get the same answer 5 times. If not, that's an opportunity to help the organization even more, just like TQM does. So we make pumps and drives is a true story. I was at a strategy meeting with an organization, and they asked the GM, what do you do? We make pumps. And they asked the VP of sales, what do you do? We make drives. The drive turned the pump head. Okay? We made both, but what was the main focus? And if the main focus was the pump, then the drive was a one-tool, one-trick pony. But if it was we make drives and we make attachments, we could actually expand the product line to different things that we could make. Any lab equipment that requires rotational effort, either spinning something, attaching a gear to rattle something or shake something, or or just spinning something. If you have a drive, you can do that. If you have a pump, you can't do that. So we had to have those deep discussions, and that was not just a security discussion. It was just a holistic. What do we do so I can better tailor what I'm going to do? Customer trust and brand reputation falls into that. Again, TQM's focus was on customer satisfaction. Why can't security? Right? I just got a notice from a healthcare place that like, oh, we compromised your child's records. Thanks. How often are you checking your kid's credit report? How many of you have frozen your kid's credit report? So, it's that type of stuff where it's like, God, really, people? Like, I got a notice though, like, oh, I think everyone did. Your Social Security number got out there with the latest Social Security Administration breach. I'm like, yeah, it's already been out there. All right. Success with or achieving a secure future with TSM. Like, security is no longer seen as an afterthought in TSM or a barrier to productivity. It's integral. It's how you do things. It becomes part of the DNA, just like quality, safety, etc. Security becomes second nature. In a security-first culture, product teams started early. HR thinks twice before signing up for something. Marketing especially, because they love their latest and greatest new marketing automation tools. They think twice. They come to you and say, hey, how can we implement this better? How can we make this work more efficiently? Security enables innovation and growth by seamlessly, it can be a facilitator. It can actually help you flesh out ideas, features, functions. Can this do that? I worked in an organization. By the time I got my 8th password, I was like, nope, we're not doing this anymore. Brought in single sign-on. And then when we first did the evaluation, it was like, oh, we have 37 applications. That helped us with the business case. We ended up with like 184 by the time it was fully implemented. Apparently people didn't know what software and services they used, and then any new product and feature had to have SSO, and if it didn't, there had to be a really good reason not to. And the icing on the cake was if we could do automated provisioning, because I'd rather click the disabled and then it all goes away. And same thing with provisioning. Oh, create account. Now you get access to everything that you need. Security enables that ease of access and ease of use. But if they're not brought in early enough, there's someone who signed up for something who's creating accounts, which is wasting time. Now we're going back around to quality, and if quality efficiency via security, see? That's why security should be in quality. Again, for thought, not necessarily improving trust. So e-commerce company, they're always they're always passing good information. They're always keeping their customer data safe. Like, there's different scales of that though. If Amazon had a data breach, would you still buy from them? Probably. So, things to think about when it comes to those examples. Continuous improvement. Obviously, I've covered that extensively. All right. Keeping mindful of time. Yes. So, all right. TSM is proactive, not reactive, because it's involved with everything. Security becomes everyone's responsibility. It becomes part of the culture, just like quality, just like safety. TSM enhances organizational resilience because we can respond faster, because we know about it better, because people aren't doing dumb stuff. We can support growth. With it in place, companies can move forward because they already have privacy, the encryption, the steps that are needed to make things safe and secure. And the steps are doing it through the assessment, develop a security framework, training and communication, continuous monitoring, and integrating with the business goals. Doing that will help the organization. So there's my contact info. What questions do you have about
Phone for your question.
TQM and TSM and again, the goal was today, while the microphone gets there, was to rethink about how we're presenting information and how it can be part of the org. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your talk. Thank you for coming, Doctor. Where can we find some official training modules to, if they do exist, to incorporate TSM? Because as much as I'd love to go back to work on Monday and say, hey, this is what I learned at CornCon, my boss is going to look at me and say, okay, now what? Okay. So would there be any official training modules?
I am not aware of anyone who's doing any specific training modules, but I do know in 18 or 22, there was a book published called Total Security Management of Treaties to Implementation, something like that, that talks about the ideas of implementing that. It's, and there's been a couple other books around total security management. Walter, you got one in the back.
Oh, in the back.
Yeah, but I don't know of anyone who's actually put together like a webinar on TSM.
So when I'm trying to promote security, especially to C-suite types, I'm generally promoting it in terms of even a subset of disaster preparedness. You know, what really is the difference between a tornado hitting the data center or a ransomware attack? If you're prepared for one, you're prepared for the other. Do you see that viewpoint as complementary to what you're speaking on, or do those viewpoints clash somewhat?
No, I think BCDR is a way of adding that resilience. It's part of I think it's part of TSM. You know, a part of total security management. Your analogy of ransomware or tornado, it's about availability at that point. And if you have another way to bring it back, then you're spot on. The driving force was relating things to the audience. What I found through my research, a struggle that we have in risk communications and anything really even technical, is what's in it for me. So there's this idea, or not even, it's a phenomenon called information asymmetry, or the information asymmetry gap. It's the difference between what you know and what they know, or what they think they know even at that point. And there's good information asymmetry out there in the world. For instance, if you are having chest pains, you're going to talk to a doctor, a medical doctor, and hopefully a cardiologist to say, hey, there's this issue, because there's a gap between what you know and they know, and that's good. And then there's bad information, and that creates a good relationship. And there's bad information asymmetry. The classic example is that of a car dealer or a car salesman. There's the difference between what you think you know, pricing and comparisons, and what they know, which is the absolute price that they're willing to let this thing go, but how much they're screwing you over. And that creates an adversarial relationship. And so the question is, what relationship do you have with your executives and your boards? And a lot of it comes down to trust. And so we can improve trust by credibility, reliability, and intimacy. So what do you know? Do you do what you say? And how close am I willing to get with you? But the underlying piece of that is self-orientation. It's about them. And when you make it more about them and how what we do as security impacts them and how they function and how we can make their lives easier and better, it improves trust, and then we can move forward. And so when you start thinking about how to present it, ask them, do we have robust, what business are you in, or industry? Varied? Okay, so let's pick on manufacturing because it's easy, right? We have robust processes so that machines run continuously. That's a quality function. You could argue, well, it's operations, yeah, but if like the machine breaks, that's like maintenance, which is potentially a quality function. Okay, what about security? If it's connected, now we have a security function that could take that machine down. Well, that's quality's problem. Well, no, it's our problem because they got in. The machine running, that's business continuity. So it's some of it's connecting it back to how they can understand it. I'll give you this piece of advice too. research has shown that people, as soon as they hear cybersecurity, go immediately negative. And so then they shut down, and so there's what's called an affective response or an emotional response. Unless they are tuned and trained to know that it's not all bad, then they will respond irrationally. And there's a recency bias too. So if they've been in the news, had a breach, etc., they're going to respond even more negatively. You know, the expression of "don't let a breach go to waste" is largely driven by that, because there's recency bias and there's functionally a effect heuristic on it of like, we can change this and make things better for you. A lot of people though haven't had that direct experience with it, but if you want to talk about like safety and fire prevention, find the person whose house burned down 3 years ago. They're going to respond differently than someone who's like, my house has never burned down. I have a fire extinguisher upstairs and in my kitchen. We're fine. Like, I tell my kids all the time, like, because their rooms are a freaking mess. I'm like, I don't want you to have a perfectly clean room. I ask one thing of you. I need a safety path. I need a path between your bed and the door. Why? Because when it's dark and full of smoke and I have 3 seconds to get through the door to you and out, I can't be stepping on Legos, dude. Like, so it's being driven in, you know. Now, where's that coming from? Is it my risk train? No. Is it risk? Maybe a little bit of it, because I was trained in firefighting in the Navy. I know what it's like to do. Huh? And Legos hurt. You step on them in the middle of the night. Like, you run around in slippers in the house, it's fine. You do it in the middle of the night, you know. So, putting it in perspective. And then they get it. My kids kind of get, they're like, okay, I guess. Plus, it makes Dad happy, so whatever. And usually it's not even clean, it's just shoving the stuff to the side. Slight tangent on that. Did I actually answer your question? Oh, okay, good.
Very good. We're just about at time. Let's one more question.